The NBA world is telling us that the Jazz should trade Lauri Markkanen. Is it possible they're right? Hope not. Plus, Danny Ainge tell us this might happen? It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. On today's edition of Locked on Jazz, breaking news out of Cleveland that's not going to make any of us very happy just came across the wire. The number one rumor in the NBA is the Jazz might trade Lauri Markkanen. Why would they possibly do that and trade the best player on the roster? Or is it possible that Danny Ainge told us it was coming? And is it possible the deal is so good they can't do anything else? And is it possible it's the right move? We'll discuss all of that, plus a different idea. What about signing DeMar DeRozan and adding him to Lauri Markkanen and giving us a credible base by which for our young players to grow and build? And then finally, we'll look around the NBA on that. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. I do feel like today you might need a hug. So this is your virtual Jazz fan hug day here on Locked on Jazz. Thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, also on YouTube. Please join the chat. Please hit me with the notes along the way. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, make every moment more as the playoffs have wound down. Sports stop like sports want to, but the summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right. I want to get to something, go back to a Danny Ainge quote, but my show just got discombobulated because literally Donovan Mitchell has signed a 3-year, $150 million max contract that includes a player option for 27-28. So from a Jazz fan standpoint, this feels a little bit like, the ultimate kind of kick, because the hope was that, that he would opt out, abandon Cleveland, and that we would get great draft picks out of it. And also that the reason we moved him is because we could have never gotten him to re-sign. If Cleveland can get him to re-sign, why can't we? There is, I'll just say, I don't want to there is a real feeling in the NBA, talking to multiple teams, that Donovan's taking the money and then going to ask out. That's how it works now. You go get your bag, your $50 million a year. And then in the midst of it, when it's time, you say, okay, I'm out. And we'll see. I mean, obviously, for Cleveland standpoint, this makes the trade for Donovan much, much better. Our 2025 pick just became less valuable if he's still on the roster. Our 2026 pick swap becomes pretty unlikely to be used. Our 2027 pick, if he's still on the roster, just got less good. We'll see. He's got a player option. We'll have the 2028 pick swap. I mean, it's what the brilliance of this deal is. There's just so many pieces to it that eventually you feel like we'll get something out of it. But the initial take here, it's not great for the Jazz that Donovan Mitchell re-signs if he actually stays. There is a strong feeling in the league that he took his money and will then ask out at some point here. We'll see. The next question, though, is how much does Cleveland believe, and what is Cleveland willing to do with Darius Garland, and does he become available for teams, and what happens there? All right. The biggest story for us is we're back uncomfortably in the middle of all trade rumors involving our best player, Lauri Markkanen. Lauri's great. Everyone in the world's calling me right now. What is Lauri like? Lauri's great. He's 7'1". He can shoot the three. He can put it on the deck. He's tough as hell. He battles. He's a total pro. Lauri's awesome. And for that reason, it's hard to believe that the Jazz should trade Lauri Markkanen. And the fact that Lauri seemingly is interested, of all reports I have, in signing an extension. The difficulty is that extension can't come until August because it's matching to the day in which he signed his deal, which was late, moving out of Chicago to Cleveland originally. So that's the deal. Why would we trade Lauri Markkanen? Is first answer would be that we've gone big game hunting. And we're going to go back to Danny Ainge's big game hunting comment here in a minute to hear it and really listen to the whole thing, because what happened in that quote is Danny Ainge gave a soundbite that got grabbed nationally and everyone's had great fun with, but no one heard the full minute. And he says two things in it that are really, really interesting. One that leads you to believe that maybe they could trade Lauri Markkanen, and the other that leads you to believe that maybe they wouldn't trade Lauri Markkanen. So we'll dig into it. But why would the Jazz possibly trade Lauri Markkanen? There are two reasons why the Jazz would possibly trade Lauri Markkanen right now. None of them involve his ability. Let's be perfectly clear about that. None of them involve his ability. He is awesome. He is a fabulous player. He's a top 30 player in the NBA, working toward being a top 20 player in the NBA. He has a skill set that only Kevin Durant can match at 7'1". He is awesome. The reason you would possibly trade Lauri Markkanen is two factors are playing in that direction. One is the Jazz have tried to go big game hunting, whether it was Kristaps Porzingis or Drew Holiday or Damian Lillard or some of the players they went after at the trade deadline or Mikal Bridges, and they haven't got it done yet. And suddenly that might back up your timeline a little bit. That all of a sudden, because you're not getting these things done, and suddenly you're not able to you have not been able to make the jump you expected to, you actually have to pull back a little bit. And the right move at that point is to then move Lauri, pick up more assets, and almost restart the rebuild 22 months in. So it's not really restarting it. It's just really going. The second one would be that the NBA world is playing that way. Now, something interesting happened that we actually finally had an all-star free agent trade teams. That's like the first time that's happened in eons. When Paul George changed teams, everyone keeps saying that free agency is dead. And I generally believe them that free agency is dead, but it is worth noting that we just had a free agent all-star change teams. It is the first time since 2019 that an all-star has changed teams. Since 2019, reigning all-stars on free agency. Paul George for Dan Feldman dunked on, got this note. Since 2019, all-stars have changed teams 18 times. Prior to Paul George, all of them were via trade. So this is the first time we've had a free agent trade teams as a free agent since 2019. An all-star. Okay. Like, that's interesting. But all of a sudden, if you're the Jazz and you're trying to build this thing and you're looking at what's happened was you've gone big game hunting, you're not going to sign free agents to build players. You're probably going to have to do it through trade, but here on your last 5 attempts on trades, you've gotten nothing out of it, haven't been able to pull the trigger. Maybe you're going to have to go to more of what Oklahoma City's done, which is you build up the young core, and then you start to add pieces to it when you get your hits, when you get your Shea, you get your Chet Holmgren, you get your Jalen Williams, and then you go sign Isaiah Hartenstein and you find your Aaron Wiggins and your other guys you like and you sign them to extensions like Oklahoma City just did yesterday, and you go trade for your veteran Alex Caruso with one of your picks like they did with Josh Giddey, and then you build your team that's probably the best in the West right now. And maybe that's the model you have to follow, and part of that could be trading Lauri instead of having him be your Shea. Or you could keep Lauri and still have him be your Trey. The second thing that's happened is that the NBA, because there are a bunch of teams that are desperate, and Lowry's great. And so the package could be mammoth. And that could be the other aspect here. That if suddenly the Golden State Warriors throw Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Brendan Projemski, and 2 first-round picks, do you have to say yes? That's a lot. I don't know that they would do that. But do you have to say yes? If the San Antonio Spurs, who have a plethora of picks, suddenly throw Devin Vassell and 4 first-round picks into a package, do you have to say yes? And can we stomach that? Some of you lead me to believe you'd rather stomach a clear direction, which is that we're starting Keontae George, Cody Williams, Devin Vassell, Taylor Hendricks, and Walker Kessler. With Isaiah Collier coming off the bench, with Bryce Sensabaugh to, wow, we're just going to play fullback basketball at that point, right? That you're comfortable with that. I don't know. I'll not lie to you. On my personal note, since that is what this show is often about, I just have a hard time watching Keontae George be totally overwhelmed at the end of last year. Taylor Hendricks trying to guard the best player every night. It was cute, but it's not sustainable, and I think it would break him. I would prefer having some semblance of structure and foundation around which Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Kyle Filipowski can develop and play and learn how to play the game right. That probably puts you into the mid-range of wins, which is not great for draft position. So I get it that you might think that's not right. And there's a way to do that next year, and his name is DeMar DeRozan. We'll check on that. Plus, did Danny Ainge tell us this was coming? The full quote from Danny Ainge about big game hunting next on Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross. Also in Logan, the Chevy truck is Americana, the Silverado and the Colorado, and the lineup of SUVs just fabulous now with the Blazer and the Trailblazer, the Equinox, and the electric car, the Volt. Plus, you've got this Corvette. And the SUVs have the Suburban as well and the Tahoe, which are the Utah County assault vehicles. It is Chevy, a great lineup of American cars for you with Murdoch, Utah's car dealer for over 80 years. What a combination that is. It's all at Murdoch Chevy in Woods Cross, also in Logan. If you're going to stop by, feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com so that we can give you that VIP treatment that you deserve over at Murdoch Chevy. Murdoch Chevy. If the truck is what you want right now, go look into it. If it's an SUV or if it's the Corvette, Chevy's got the answer for you, the perfect combination of Americana and Utah. The Murdochs and Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. Give me an email at dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of Locked On, as well as the official answer for Major League Baseball. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And while sports might not be totally, I've actually watched a show recently because there's not always a game on right now. Well, then FanDuel is going to make it better for you by doing this. What is FanDuel going to do? FanDuel is going to give you a bonus every single day. That's right. All summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to start making the most of your summer. The official betting partner of Major League Baseball, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And today at FanDuel, the Reds and the Yankees start in about 9 hours. They've got a fun one with Aaron Judge's total bases, Ellie De La Cruz's total bases, and the over-under on runs on that one. You could bet on the Euro soccer round of 16. You probably don't care about Copa at this point after what happened last night. Caitlin Clark's got her own section of things as the Indiana Fever play the sold-out Las Vegas Aces, and you can bet on that one. 13.5 is the Aces favorite over the Indiana Fever. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go to Locked On NBA. They'll be up all season long. We don't take a break. We'll be at the Summer League. We're covering the free agency. We've got it all for you with our local experts giving you the national perspective. It is Locked On NBA for your second listen day. All right, let's go to Danny Ainge. Here's the full 1 minute big game hunting comment. I want you to hear two things. One, he explains why he doesn't want to go all the way down to the bottom, which is relevant to the idea of trading Lauri Markkanen. But he also, at the very end, says, if we get to July and things haven't happened, we have to pivot. And that's where we're sitting. So listen closely to this quote from Danny Ainge.
Our objective is to, find a player or two, and we're ready to roll. We're ready to go big game hunting. And that hasn't happened in the last 2 years. But if we start all over, then we're 3 years possibly or 4 years from being anywhere. We feel like we're closer than that, and we have a chance. I mean, we're going all in this summer to try to figure out what we can do to get better. When I say all in, that doesn't mean that we're going to throw all our chips in and championship or bust. I'm saying our mindset is that we're doing only to try to win. That's our only objective for the first through till we get to July. And if we don't land anything, we don't make any deals, we don't land anything, then our direction could change at that moment and wait till the next time that we can try to build a roster.
Quote from Danny Ainge, and it's really got two important points to it. David James asked that question, by the way. And the first part I think is really important. Danny Ainge's belief in why the Jazz have not gone to the very bottom like some people have wanted them to in the last 2 years was that as they went big game hunting, if they actually got a Miles Bridges or Mikal Bridges, or if they got a Drew Holiday, or if they got a Kristaps Porzingis, or if they got a Damian Lillard, and they didn't have anything else around it, as Danny Ainge says, then you're 3 or 4 years out. And if we go trade Lauri Markkanen for Jonathan Kuminga, Brendan Porzinski, Moses Moody, whatever combination, and draft picks, we're 3 or 4 years out. The big game hunting kind of, I think, has to stop for a little bit at that point, unless you can do multiples. So that's the first one. And so that leads you to believe that we're not going to trade Lauri Markkanen, because that Danny Ainge's point is, no, I don't want to be 3 or 4 years out. I want to be in a position where when the time comes and we have our assets and we can pounce, that we're actually have enough infrastructure around our players to be able to then make the jump. That's like when people say we don't have a plan, that's pretty clear. He just said it. Now this would be a pivot. And he says that too. We get to July, we might have to pivot. And here we are. They have not gone big game hunting. There's not many big game left. They do not have a way to get to 40 or 50 wins right now. Does that mean that now is the time? With the way the landscape is opening up, the desperation of some of these teams, and all of these various things that are going on, that the world is lining up, the NBA world is lining up so that the Jazz have there's such demand for Lauri that it tips to the side of you make that deal. And then does that mean that we're 3 or 4 years out? I'll be honest, here's what I've always thought we were going to do. And now the signing of Donovan Mitchell might alter that. What I always thought from the 2 years ago when I was on the golf course in LA or in Southern California watching my daughter play and we traded Rudy. And then the next day when I went to the bathroom and left the golf course again, she thought we traded Donovan and she was like despondent in the middle of the golf course. Kind of funny. Was that we would be horrendous. Oklahoma City bad for 2 or 3 years. And as our young players worked their way up to being good, because it takes a young player 4 or 5 years to be good, we would then profit off our Cleveland, LA, Minnesota picks. And as we were at like 45 and 45 wins, kind of working our young players up after 4 or 5 years of this, that then we would go grab the Minnesota 20 or the Cleveland 27, the Minnesota 29, and those picks would suddenly be the pieces that we added in to vault us up to 50 wins and make us a contender. And then maybe if we had to go get the veteran, the Isaiah Hartenstein, the Alex Carusos, that we would do it that way. But I had us 5, 6, 7 years down the road for that to happen, right? Like if you do it's 2022, and I'm talking about us getting decent by 27, 28, and then the 27, 28, 29 picks and pick swap suddenly go our direction. That's how I always envision this. We've done it differently. We've done it in a manner where maybe we will end up, and maybe we start there now. It's really fascinating. So here's the question I have for you. DeMar DeRozan is unsigned. It's not big game hunting in the sense it's going to go take us to 50 wins. If we sign DeMar DeRozan, it might get us to 34, maybe 36, maybe 38. I don't think so. But if we have DeMar DeRozan and we have Lauri Markkanen, we have a structure by which we play every day. We have a centerpiece of our offense for every possession of a whole night because you have Lauri and DeMar DeRozan on for 48 minutes. And that allows Keontae George, Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Taylor Hendricks to work off of other players instead of having the burden of it all upon themselves. I am still of a believer that you can overwhelm these kids and break them. The other theory, go back to Oklahoma City, is you just be terrible and just roll Shea out there every single day and make him deal. But DeMar DeRozan, we can criticize this and that about him and everything else. But like at the last 3 years, he's averaged 28, 25, and 24 points a game. Sure, he doesn't shoot enough threes and he's a mid-range hooper and all that. Yeah, he might not be perfect if we're trying to win a championship. We're not winning a championship next year. And to me, there's a real argument that you go give DeMar DeRozan a 2-year. Now, if this impacts being able to give this may preclude you from being able to give Lauri his extension. And so you have to be careful about this because you'd really rather use your cap space to sign Lauri to an extension. So this gets really complicated. But is there a way to sign DeMar DeRozan and still be able to do something with Lauri in his cap space or in some capacity, or do a sign and trade with Chicago for DeMar DeRozan as they're kind of doing what they're doing, and do it in a fashion so that then you have this veteran player that just kind of settles everything at all moments and creates the foundation and structure for your young players to thrive. The goal would still be the same. The goal would still be that one day you are led by Keontae George, Cody Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Walker Kessler, all the youngsters. That they're still the key to the future. The other thing on DeRozan, one of the best guys in the NBA from everything I've heard, one of the leaders in the mental health front, one of the most respected players amongst everyone, and has been nothing but a pro in his career. And he plays a lot. 79 last year, 74 the year before, 76 year before that, a few years in 80 and 82. Might be a great model. I get very nervous about young players without a model or with bad models. To me, there's a real argument that if you don't trade Lauri Markkanen, you actually add DeMar DeRozan in probably a sign-in trade if you really want to get into it, so that you can then sign Lauri to his extension. And you sign him to a 2-year deal that he just doesn't seem to be getting anywhere unless he gets it from LA. And you go ahead at that point, and yeah, you're probably not going to bottom out and just be horrendous. In fact, late game, you now have an answer. But your youngsters grow around structure and foundation. What's your thoughts? Give me a thumbs up if you like the idea. Give me a comment on the section. If you don't, send me a note on at DLock09. We'll look through the NBA. I'm not totally convinced Dallas got that much better yesterday like everybody else. That's next on Locked on Jazz. Thanks so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. For your second listen, Locked on NBA. Subscribe and follow Locked on NBA for your daily 30-minute recap of all things NBA, opinions on all the biggest stories. Plus, we'll be there every single day of the offseason for you. All right, let's go through a few a few Jazz notes. Chris Dunn, sadly, because we love Chris Dunn, is going to sign with the LA Clippers. Sounds like it will be a sign and trade deal with the Jazz. Don't expect the Jazz to be getting an awful lot out of that sign and trade. But you never know. They don't have a lot of minimum salary young guys. I don't think they'll get off Amir Coffey, who's an interesting player at 3.9, and I don't think they want to play Chris Dunn 3.9. Kobe Brown's a young player at 2.5. And then that's Bones Highland at 4. So I don't really see I'm sure there's something that they need us to do to take some money back for them in some capacity to get the deal done because of where their cap situation is. They're actually right now without Paul George on their books. They're actually pretty small. They're not, it's not crazy. Their cap space, their tax space is limited. They're a few $100,000. So something of that series. Maybe we'll see. Maybe we pick up Amir Coffey, who's 27 and just a player. Brandon Boston's a free agent, so I don't think you can do a dual sign and trade. So I'm not entirely sure what that sign and trade would be, looking at their salary structure and their players, but we'll see on that one. They probably did have to give Chris Dunn a little bit more than minimum because I know 3 other teams that were interested in Chris Dunn as well. He had a nice marketplace. Jazz signed Drew Eubanks, who is a functional center in the NBA. There's some comments that 2 years, 10 seems like a lot for a guy who's kind of a backup third center. I think that's right. The other thing you got to remember, though, here is also the Jazz need to hit the minimum salaries at some point. Eubanks is interesting. He's like 6'9", 6'10". He's pretty mobile. He's out of Oregon State and has been a really good, viable 15 to 20-minute player in the NBA. Had a really good stretch at the end of the season in Portland 2 years ago where he got a lot of time and played really, really well. And was good in Phoenix and solid for 20 minutes a night. The Jazz have waived Omer Yurtseven. Jalen Smith, who I really, really like, signed a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Bulls. The Detroit Pistons have done some interesting things. They just signed Tobias Harris. They may have decided that they cannot have, and Tim Hardaway Jr., so that they may have just decided they cannot have solely young players around young players a little bit. And Tobias Harris is at 2 years, $52 million is going to give him some of that foundation. I'm not totally convinced that Dallas got that much better. Klay Thompson is Klay freaking Thompson. I got it. But Klay freaking, and he's a great shooter, and he's going to get amazing looks from Kyrie and Luka. He's a better shooter on the move than he is standstill, though. He's not totally a spot and shoot guy. That is going to be a little catch and shoot guy. That's going to spot up catch and shoot guy. That's going to be a little different for him than it has been in the past. He'll be great at it. He is a tremendous defensive liability at this point. I don't think it's, and I got to tell you what, watching Klay Thompson warm up before games and looking at his legs, the fact that he's actually functioning and playing in the league is one of the most awesome things I've ever seen because his legs do not look the same at all. That leg that has had the ACL and had the Achilles is so much smaller and different than his other legs. His other leg, he doesn't have 3 of them, is absolutely stunning to me that he's able to function in the NBA. But it also tells you to what level he can function in the NBA. I think the Warriors protected him at an outrageous level, and the Mavericks are going to be surprised at how poor he really is defensively. I like Najee Marshall. I like Quentin Grimes. I actually think they're far more the key to whether or not the Mavericks have gotten better than with what they've done than Klay Thompson. I'm not entirely sure, this sounds blasphemous, that other than his veteran moxie, Klay Thompson is going to be that much better for them than Josh Green. Oklahoma City added Isaiah Hartenstein at about $30 million a year, re-signed Isaiah Joe at 10, re-signed Aaron Wiggins at 8, added Alex Caruso at 9. So they're taking advantage of the years they get with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren on minimal contracts right now and adding up around it, which is a pretty interesting way to do it and the right way to do it. And they look really, really good. It looks really, really good. I would suggest from this that the other Jalen Williams out of Arkansas, who is only a $2 million player, might be available if somebody wanted him. Maybe not. Maybe just a $2 million for a second-round pick. They just keep him on the roster and he plays their third center, but I think his minutes are gone. The Warriors and Lakers are really interesting. They're both just kind of hovering around there, and the Clippers, and they all seem to be taking a step backwards. And what do the Clippers and the Warriors do next is really interesting. The Clippers are loading up with defensive players right now, which is just kind of weird twist to me. That goes with James Harden, but Derek Jones at $9 million, Nicholas Batum at $4 million. Then they've taken these wild flyers. They've added Chris Dunn and added Derek Jones Jr., 2 guys who can't shoot very well or don't shoot very well. Chris has gotten better, obviously. So super interesting to see what they do. Obviously, they're doing everything they can to trade Russell Westbrook and move him off the roster. We'll see where they go from there. And Denver gets a big hit with the loss of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, trying to stay out of the second apron. Probably leaves the West now as Oklahoma City as the favorite. Minnesota right there as the second best team. Like Minnesota's kind of very subtly getting a win out of this. Minnesota's just sitting quietly on the sidelines right now while their team will be as good as anyone in the West next year. They've got some cap issues and money issues as time goes on, and Karl Anthony Towns is making 49 and Rudy's making 43 and Ant's making 42. But Mike Conley now comes in for them at a nice little $10 million a year. So they've got themselves, they're lacking some depth. But they are probably the best, if not second best team in the Western Conference with Oklahoma City, the way things have shaken out here, and they have to be really excited about where they are. And they've really yet to lose anyone of any importance to who they are. They have Naz Reid signed. They'll have their three little centers. Nickeil Alexander-Walker will continue for them, and they'll have to deal with some of these issues as time comes up here. As Rudy has a player option in 25-26. Naz Reid has a player option in 25-26, but they are in a really good position. Oklahoma City obviously has made the moves to make them probably the favorites in the West. Then you have Minnesota second, and I would guess from there, you would say Dallas is third in the Western Conference after what they did. And who's the fourth best team in the West? Like, it's really interesting where we sit right now. The Clippers have slipped with the locks of Paul George. Phoenix, we're still just not sure, though they've done a nice job adding pieces around. The Pelicans added DeJounte Murray, but what's next? The Lakers feel like they're just holding court right now. See where they go. Sacramento hasn't made a move. The Warriors have certainly taken a step backwards until they make another move. The Rockets are waiting, have kind of kept their young group together to make another push. Where Memphis now is healthy and comes on up. So who is the fourth best team in the Western Conference right now? It's probably still Denver because they have Jokic, but then it's wide open after that. And everyone seems to have taken a minor step back in the midst of all of this. So we'll see. If you're Sacramento, I might feel fairly decent about myself if I'm holding ground and can improve a little bit. So it's kind of been a wild little opening days of free agency. Interested to see your comments and thoughts on it all. This has been Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. We now send you on YouTube to the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked on Sports Today. If you're on audio, check out The Big 6 in 60. It's our new national show every day.